There's a photo on my phone I keep coming back to. It's from last Thanksgiving, me, standing in the parking lot of a Hampton Inn somewhere off I-81 in Virginia, holding a gas station coffee with both hands, grinning like an idiot. Nobody else in the frame. Just me and the open road and the particular gold light that only happens at 7 in the morning in November. I look free in that photo. I look like myself. My sister took the credit for that, actually. Not intentionally, but if she hadn't done what she did the week before, I never would have been standing in that parking lot. I never would have booked the trip. I never would have finally, after 31 years, understood that the life I'd been quietly shrinking myself to fit inside was never meant for me in the first place. Her name is Christina, 4 years older than me, which she has treated less like a birth order fact and more like a divine appointment. Growing up, Christina was the one our parents pointed to when they wanted to explain what success looked like. She got the grades, the scholarships, the corporate job at 24 that came with a corner office and the benefits package our parents still brag about at church. She married a man named Scott who coaches youth baseball on weekends and drives a truck that costs more than my annual salary as a middle school art teacher. They have 2 kids, Hayden, who is 8, and Remy, who is 5. They are genuinely sweet children. That part matters because none of what happened was about them. It was about a pattern that started so gradually, I didn't notice it becoming a pattern at all. The first time Christina asked me to watch the kids, Hayden was barely walking. She and Scott had a work dinner, his company Christmas party, I think, and their usual sitter had canceled. I said yes without hesitating because of course I did. I was 23. I didn't have plans, and honestly, I liked the idea of being the fun aunt who showed up with Play-Doh and let the baby stay up past bedtime. It was one night. It was nothing. Then it was a weekend. Then it was a weekend. Then it was spring break. Then it was just while we're at the conference, and just while Scott's traveling, and just while we get this thing sorted out. The just kept appearing in front of everything, making each ask sound small and temporary. And I kept saying yes, because I kept believing each one was the exception rather than the rule. By the time Remy was born, I had become, in practical terms, an unpaid on-call childcare provider who also happened to have a full-time job and a life of my own. That last part, the life of my own, felt increasingly theoretical. I missed my friend Diane's bachelorette weekend because Christina needed me to stay with the kids while she and Scott attended some kind of couples retreat in Asheville. I drove 2 hours on a Tuesday evening to help when Hayden had a stomach bug and the nanny called in sick, even though I had parent-teacher conferences the next morning. I rearranged a dentist appointment, a car inspection, a first date I'd been looking forward to for 2 weeks. Every time I said yes, my mother said something like, "That's so wonderful that you two are close." Every time I felt resentment rise up in my chest, I pushed it back down and told myself family is family. The thing about that phrase, family is family, is that it only ever got deployed in one direction. It meant I should help Christina. It never seemed to mean Christina should help me. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Okafor about 18 months ago, not specifically because of Christina. There were other things, other reasons. But she came up within the first few sessions anyway. The way a splinter comes up when you finally start pressing around the right spot. What does it cost you when you say yes to your sister? Dr. Okafor asked me once. I started listing things. Time, money, actually. Gas, canceled plans I'd already paid for. Sleep, when I drove out there late. Energy that I didn't have left for my own students or my own work or my own relationships. And what does it get you? I thought about it. She's grateful, I said, for a day or two, and then she forgets and it starts over. Dr. Okafor didn't say anything. She had this quality of waiting that made the silence feel instructive. "It doesn't get me much," I said eventually. "No," she said, "it doesn't." I didn't change anything immediately. That's not how it works. But I started noticing. I started paying attention to the specific way Christina framed her requests. Never questions, always statements, wrapped in the soft packaging of assumption. She didn't ask if I could watch the kids. She said, "I need you to watch the kids, or you'll take them Saturday." Or, most memorably, "I already told Hayden you're coming." That last one she used 3 times. 3 separate occasions. She told her 8-year-old I was coming before she told me, because she knew I wouldn't say no to the kid directly. It was strategic in a way that she probably didn't even fully realize was strategic. That's the thing about people who've been accommodated their whole lives. They don't plan their entitlement so much as they simply expect the world to keep rearranging itself around them. I was practicing saying no, quietly, in small doses. "I couldn't help you this weekend. I have plans. I can't make it Tuesday. I have work in the morning." Christina's responses to these smaller no's were cool but manageable. A little huffy. A text to her mom that I would hear about secondhand. Nothing I couldn't handle. Then came the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I had booked a trip. 3 nights at a cabin outside Staunton, Virginia. Me and 2 of my closest friends, Janelle and Petra. We'd been planning it since September. It was supposed to be the first real trip I'd taken in 2 years. The first time I deliberately built something for myself and protected it on the calendar, instead of leaving it open to be colonized by other people's needs. I had paid the deposit. I had arranged a substitute for the 2 school days I'd need. I had been quietly, privately looking forward to it the way you look forward to water when you've been thirsty for a long time. That Wednesday, Christina texted me while I was grading papers. "Hey, so Scott's company is flying him to a leadership conference in Denver the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and I got invited to come with him. It's one of those spouse-included deals. Great hotel, open bar, the whole thing. We'd leave Saturday morning and be back Tuesday. Mom and Dad are doing their Florida trip that week. You know how Dad is about that golf thing. Anyway, I figured you could take the kids. I already told them Aunt Lily is coming." Hayden literally screamed, "So cute! Let me know what time works for you to come get them." I read it twice. I want to be specific about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't just anger. It was something more layered than that. There was anger, yes, the quick, hot kind that comes from being assumed upon. But underneath it was something heavier, a tiredness that had been accumulating for years, and a very clear, very calm recognition that this was not actually a new thing. This was the thing. The same thing, wearing Thanksgiving clothes. She had not asked me. She had not mentioned Scott's conference and inquired whether I might possibly be free. She had told her children I was coming before she had mentioned it to me. She had already framed my presence as a settled fact and a text that also included the phrase, "Let me know what time works for you." As if the only variable was logistics, as if my willingness was simply not a variable at all. And the detail that landed heaviest, our parents weren't available not because of an emergency, but because of a golf trip, a leisure trip, one they took every year, one that was, in their case, also non-negotiable. Interesting how that worked. I set my phone down on my desk. I looked at the stack of drawings my students had turned in that day. 6th graders doing charcoal portraits, most of them too heavy-handed with the shadows, some of them unexpectedly beautiful. I thought about Janelle and Petra and the cabin and the reservation that existed on a calendar with my name on it. Then I picked my phone back up and typed, "I actually can't that week. I have plans I made months ago. I hope you can find someone." My hands were not entirely steady. That's the honest truth. Christina's response came in 40 minutes later and was 2 paragraphs long. The summary was, "I was being selfish. These were family priorities. What plans could I possibly have that were more important than my sister needing help? Did I understand how hard it was to have 2 kids and a demanding career? Did I not realize that Scott's advancement benefited the whole family?" I did not respond. She called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called that evening. I let that go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go too. Then my mother called, which meant Christina had already made a phone call of her own, which meant the family apparatus was mobilizing. My mother's message was gentler but carried the same essential cargo. Christina needed me. It was Thanksgiving week. Family help family. Surely whatever I had planned could be moved or canceled. I called my mother back because I wasn't ready to go fully silent with her. Not yet. I told her I had a trip booked with friends, that I paid for it, that I'd arranged coverage at work. Can't you just postpone it? She said. I made this plan in September, I said. Christina made her plan 2 days ago and assumed I was available. There was a pause. She has a lot on her plate. I know she does, I said. But Mom, I have a plate too. Another pause, longer. I just think family comes first. I told her I loved her and said I had to go. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while after that, which sounds dramatic, but it wasn't, really. It was more like I needed to be very close to the ground while I decided something. What I decided was this: I was going on my trip. I was not canceling it, postponing it, or abbreviating it. I was going to pack my car Thursday night after Thanksgiving dinner, which I would still attend, because I wasn't blowing up the holiday, just protecting what came after it. And I was going to drive to Virginia on Friday morning before anyone could manufacture a reason for me to stay. Thursday dinner was its own thing. Christina arrived with the kids in a particular energy that I can only describe as performatively wounded. The kind of hurt that's on display specifically so you'll notice it and feel responsible for it. She was polite to me in the way that was designed to communicate that she was being polite to me, despite everything. Scott was friendly and oblivious in equal measure. Hayden showed me a drawing he'd done at school, and I told him it was excellent. Because it was. My dad made his annual speech about gratitude. My mother had made too much food in the good way. I ate my weight in sweet potato casserole and talked to my aunt about her garden, and I felt the specific bittersweet quality of a family holiday when you know that something is shifting underneath it. After dinner, while Christina was putting Remy down in the guest room, she stopped me in the hallway. I really can't believe you're doing this, she said. Her voice was low. The kids were nearby. I have plans, I said. I made them months ago. You're my sister. I know I am. That's supposed to mean something. I looked at her for a long moment. She looked genuinely hurt. And I want to say that clearly because I think it's important to not flatten her into a villain. She wasn't manufacturing the hurt. She actually felt it. But the hurt was coming from the fact that I was behaving differently than she'd come to expect, and that is a different thing from me actually doing something wrong. It does mean something, I said, but it doesn't mean I don't get to have my own life. I drove home that night and packed my car, set my alarm for 6. Janelle picked up on the first ring when I called her from the road on Friday morning. I could hear Petra in the background asking if I was actually on my way. When I said yes, they both made a noise that I can only describe as audible relief, like they'd half expected me to cancel. I want to tell you what the drive was like, because it matters. It was November, clear and cold, that particular gray-blue quality that Virginia mornings have in the fall. I had a playlist I'd made specifically for the trip. I had a thermos of coffee. I had the window cracked just slightly, cold air on my face, and for the first 2 hours I waited for the guilt to kick in, the way it always had before, the familiar weight of having said no to someone who expected yes. It didn't come, or rather, it came a little, in the way old habits do, the ghost of a feeling. But underneath it was something steadier and larger, something that felt remarkably like being okay. My phone blew up that first day. Christina. My mom. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in 4 months who apparently had been briefed. A cousin who texted "Hope you're doing okay" in the pointed way that means she had heard a story about me and found me lacking. I read the messages. I didn't respond to most of them. I sat on the cabin porch with Janelle and Petra, drinking wine and watching the Blue Ridge go orange and purple in the late afternoon light, and I told them the whole thing start to finish, and they listened the way good friends do, without immediately jumping to fix it. What are you going to do about the family stuff? Petra asked eventually. Talk to them when I get back, I said. I said all of it, properly. Are you nervous? I thought about it honestly. A little. But less than I thought I'd be. Janelle topped off my glass. Good, she said. I spent 3 days in that cabin. We hiked a trail that nearly killed us on the second day and laughed about it for hours. We made elaborate breakfasts and watched old movies. I slept 9 hours 2 nights in a row, which I genuinely could not remember doing in years. I took the photo in the Hampton Inn parking lot on the way home, when I stopped for gas and coffee and stood in the cold air feeling absurdly and specifically like myself. Christina had found a solution, it turned out. Scott's mother drove up from Roanoke to watch the kids for the week. It was a 4-hour drive for her, and I am sure it was an imposition. But here is what that information told me. There had always been other options. The assumption that I was the solution wasn't because I was the only one available. It was because I was the one who had never said no before. I called my mother the Tuesday after I got home. Not to apologize, I was clear on that, but because I wanted to have an actual conversation rather than a defensive one. I love you, I told her. And I love Christina. But I need you to understand that when she tells me I'm coming somewhere before she's asked me, that's not okay. And when you call to reinforce it, that makes things harder, not easier. My mother was quiet for a while. Then she said, I didn't know she did that. The telling you before asking. She's done it a lot, I said. For years. Another long pause. I think we've all just assumed you were more flexible. Because I never pushed back, I said. But flexible doesn't mean available for everything, all the time with no notice. That's just not having any limits. She didn't argue with that. She sat with it in the way I've noticed she does when something is landing differently than she expected. My mother is a lot of things, but she's not actually unreasonable. She just needed the information. Christina and I had our conversation 2 weeks later. It was not easy, and I won't pretend it was. She cried at one point, which was hard to sit with. She said she felt like she'd lost her safety net. I told her I understood that, and I also told her that being someone's safety net without being asked, without being compensated or even properly acknowledged, had been costing me things I hadn't been saying out loud. You never told me, she said. You never asked, I said. That landed. I could see it land. We didn't resolve everything in one conversation. We probably won't for a while. But something shifted. She texted me 2 weeks after that conversation to ask with a question mark and an acknowledgement that I might be busy, whether I'd want to come to Hayden's school performance in December. Not to watch the kids, just to come, as family, as her sister, not her babysitter. I went. Hayden was in a holiday concert, and he played the recorder with tremendous confidence and very approximate pitch, and I sat next to Christina in the school gymnasium, and she leaned over at one point and said quietly, "Thank you for coming." It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was just two sisters at a school concert. But it felt different than things had felt in a long time, because I had gotten there by choosing to go, not by being assumed upon until I had no choice. I still have the photo. Hampton Inn parking lot November morning, both hands around a bad coffee, grinning at nothing. I look free in it, because I was. That's the thing nobody tells you about saying no to the people you love. It's not a betrayal. It's not cruelty. It's just the beginning of figuring out what yes actually means, what it means when it's offered freely, out of real desire, instead of being extracted from a person who was never taught she was allowed to decline. I keep learning that. Some days better than others, but I'm learning it. I want to acknowledge something before I wrap this up because I think it's the part that took me the longest to actually understand. What happened between me and Christina wasn't really about Thanksgiving. It wasn't about 5 days, or Denver, or Scott's conference, or even the kids. It was about a cause and effect chain that had been running quietly for years, one that I had helped build just as much as she had. Every time I said yes when I meant no, I was teaching her something. I was teaching her that my no wasn't real, that it was a starting point for negotiation or a temporary obstacle, not an actual answer. And she learned that lesson the way anyone learns anything repeated often enough. She stopped questioning it. She stopped even seeing it. The assumption became invisible to her because I had never made it visible. That's not an excuse for her behavior. It's just the honest mechanics of how it worked. I think about the version of me from 5 years ago, the one who would have canceled that cabin trip without Christina even having to push hard. She would have sighed and said, "Okay, fine," and then spent the whole week quietly resentful. and nothing would have changed, and by Christmas, she'd be doing it again. That version of me thought she was being a good sister. She was actually just deferring a problem that kept getting bigger. The courage it took to send that first text, "I can't that week, I have plans," was not dramatic. It didn't feel like a big moment. It felt terrifying in a small, private way, the way doing something you've been avoiding always does. But the thing about that kind of courage is that it compounds. The second no was easier than the first. The phone call with my mother was hard but survivable. The hallway conversation with Christina at Thanksgiving dinner was uncomfortable and worth it. None of those conversations would have happened if I hadn't sat with Dr. Okafor long enough to actually look at what the pattern was costing me. That's the intelligence part of it, not cleverness, not strategy, but the willingness to examine your own life honestly, to ask what's actually happening here, instead of just reacting or enduring. Janelle and Petra had been telling me for years, gently, that I gave too much and asked for too little. I heard them, but I wasn't ready to see it yet. Readiness is its own kind of wisdom, and it comes when it comes. What I'm still learning, slowly, imperfectly, is that the people who love you are capable of adjusting. Christina texted me to really ask about Hayden's concert. My mother said she hadn't known about the pattern. They were not fixed, immovable forces. They were people operating inside a system that I had partially created, and when the system changed, they changed with it. Not instantly, not without friction, but genuinely. Hayden played the recorder at that December concert with absolute confidence and completely approximate pitch. And I sat next to my sister in a gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and little kids, and she said thank you, quietly, and meant it. That moment was only possible because I had made a different choice 3 weeks earlier. Cause and effect, working slowly, working honestly. I don't have a neat conclusion for any of this. I have a photo from a Hampton Inn parking lot and a sister I'm still figuring out how to be close to in a way that's real. I have friends who showed up for me when I finally let them. I have a life that feels more and more like it actually belongs to me. That's enough. That's more than enough. It's everything, actually.